Hello and welcome to another episode on our podcast, Talking Female Health with Amy and Lisa, with my amazing co-host Amy Connor and me, myself, Lisa Yara. And today's topic is on the role of consent and the importance of consent in female health. Consent meaning actively checking in. Is your body saying yes to the examination that is going to happen? To penetrative sex that you might have, or any other kind of touch experience. Is your body saying yes, or is it saying no? And even standing up for yourself in your doctor's office, if you dare, that they might need to take things slower so that your nervous system can settle and adjust. And I think the nervous system, there we have it already, is like one of the key factors in this discussion or around this topic. Amy, where would you like to start?
Yeah, what a big topic. Okay, so I feel that I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday, how the connection between the body and ourselves is super important when it comes to consent, and being aware of your body and your nervous system and how you're feeling in that given moment is so key to understanding whether or not you're consenting to what is happening to you or what is you are experiencing. And a lot of the time we are just, consent is taken as it's assumed that we consent to things because we are not told that we can say no, or we can ask for time and space. And especially in the medical community where everything is really rushed, they're under time pressures all the time, and a lot of the time things aren't clearly explained to you and you're not fully informed, therefore you cannot give full consent. And this was definitely something that I experienced a lot with my medical examinations. I didn't know what was going to be done to me. And, I can remember being sent for an ultrasound, and my understanding was I was going for what pregnant women had. I was going to have some jelly on my stomach and they were going to do an ultrasound. And they did that. And then they did an internal ultrasound, which I had absolutely no idea was a thing. I totally wasn't prepared for it. And it was really, really painful. And I can remember afterwards thinking, if I'd have known this was going to happen to me, I would have brought some wipes and I would have brought a pad and I would have, all of these things that I would have been mentally preparing for and physically preparing for. So I think it's that the biggest thing to get across is that it's okay for you to ask questions and for you to be really clear on what is going to happen to you before you let the procedure begin. And I really wish, when I look back, that I'd gone in with that understanding that it was okay for me to say, okay, so before I get undressed and get on that table, can you just talk me through exactly what's going to happen? So I'm aware of it, because this happens all the time where procedures take place and you've consented to one thing and then all of a sudden it escalates into something else. And when you're in that place of vulnerability and pain and wanting to know what's wrong with you, in inverted commas, it's really hard for you to say no. Because
and even if you've already taken so many steps, now you're invested. Now you want to go to the end.
Absolutely. And it's hard. It's really hard. And I do think that this is something that really needs to be looked at the medical community as a whole, because I think it's an institutional failing that this is happening. And, I always think to myself, I'm quite I'm a very privileged person. Like, I'm used to speaking up for myself. I will ask questions. I'm relatively educated and aware. And I think that, and the other thing that I always think is I've got a good support network as well. Like, I've got people that I can speak to and converse in, and who can and support me after I've left the procedure. Whereas I always think about these individuals who don't have that opportunity, who maybe aren't used to speaking up for themselves, who don't have anybody else to say to them, actually, Amy, I'm really sorry that happened to you, because it's not an ideal experience, and you will be, your body will be traumatized from it, and you will need a bit of time to reassess and reconnect with yourself. Yeah, and I always feel for these individuals that don't have that support network and that knowledge, because I think it must be terrifying to step into a procedure that you think, oh, they're just going to put something on my stomach, and then all of a sudden you're being vaginally penetrated. It's not nice. Yeah.
No, and I mean, even though you are a privileged person, you haven't always been able to speak up for yourself or felt the confidence to speak up for yourself. And when you do, a lot of doctors will still see you more of as a nuisance than someone than a human being who has valid concerns and just for the sake of their own nervous system safety want to be talked through so they know what to expect and can mentally and physically and emotionally prepare for these things. And I think that is like one of the key roles of consent, is like the sense of safety. And that you have your boundaries and are allowed to have your boundaries. And which doesn't mean they have to be set in stone. Like, they can be adapted, they are malleable, but in consent with what works for you and taking it step by step, because that will influence the way you experience the situation. If we take that medical examination that you just said, if you had known beforehand, as you say, you would have had mental preparations, emotional preparations, you might have already looked out for who will support you afterwards so you can talk through these things. And then you experience that, then the experience of the thing itself isn't half as bad usually as it is. Also because then when your nervous system relaxes because it feels safe, you are more open. And what often happens, we contract because we are in fear, because we don't know what's happening. And then, especially with something like penetration, it will hurt more, of course, because you're not open to it.
Absolutely.
Like, no wonder. And
and just looking back, I wouldn't have gone back to work. Like, I didn't go back to work anyway, but I'd planned to go back to work because I was thinking, oh, I'm just going to go and have this done. And then I was just like, no, I'm not going back to work. But just little things like that, where, like you say, you have that preparation and you have that control. It's that feeling of, as you say, safety and control around a situation, or as much control as you can.
Let's say agency.
Yeah.
Like, there is a doctor who wants to do whatever they need to do from a medical standpoint, and you are a human being who is equally worthy of having their needs met and their desires respected. Doesn't mean we always get what we want, but we can negotiate from an equal standpoint. Also to not re-traumatize people, because as a doctor you don't know if that person has been sexually violated. And when you go without consent or without just preparing the person for what's going to happen, you can inadvertently recreate that trauma and leave the person, the whole thing, the experience can get really bad. I had a client who went to physiotherapist but for their hips and pelvic floor. And that experience they had because there wasn't enough, even though that my client said the person was really nice, he was taking her time with me, and still there was something that made the experience so that in the end she had more hip pain than before, feels totally contracted and doesn't want to go there anymore because this essential consent wasn't given every step of the way. And also, as you say, we talk ourselves out of it. Like, oh, we are so far into the examination already. Who am I to say no now?
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a no forever. It's a no, let's retreat back some steps. Let me resettle, and then we can try again and see if I can go further.
Yeah. And I think it's just, it boils down when it's that one-on-one situation to communication. Like the importance of communication is vital, and I think that I recently had to take my 1-year-old nephew to the emergency hospital, and obviously he can't give consent himself. But the whole time, the nurse was there just going through the procedures without communicating. And I was like, okay, can you just talk me through what you're doing and let me know what you're doing and why, and then I can make sure that everything's okay. Like, because I just think that it's really easy to get into that routine of doing your job. And they are, I totally get it, they are totally pressured time-wise. This poor nurse, she probably hasn't even had a cup of tea all day or a lunch break or whatever. But I think it's just that understanding that communication is so important, and letting that person know what you're doing and why, and asking them if they feel safe, if they're okay. It just presents such a nicer environment. Because,
or even just phrasing it like, you are allowed to withdraw your consent at any time. And then of course it's the person's responsibility if they will really do it, but just hearing it, that it's a possibility, connects a different dot in the brain.
Is everything still okay? All of the language that you can use to make it a safer, because it's never a pleasant experience when you go for a medical examination. It's not ever anything that anybody wants to do. But I think the choice of language and the way that it's communicated can change so much the experience. And, I've talked about this before, when you're in that space where you're receiving medical care like that, a lot of the time you're not thinking straight. Potentially you're in pain, or you're feeling conscious because you've not got any underwear on, and you're exposed. It can feel very vulnerable. Even before any examination has started, like, you are completely out of your comfort zone. So I just feel that the understanding around consent needs to be clear for both parties, for the person doing the procedure and the patient receiving it. And having that mutual understanding and respect for each other, because I feel, I don't know what it's like in Germany, Lisa, but I feel in the UK we still hold doctors, dentists, medical professionals on a little bit of a pedestal. We can't say no to them because they're helping me, and I should consent to this, or I should just keep quiet and let them get on with it. And I think that kind of imbalance of power is where a lot of the issues around consent are formed, because it's almost like this person is doing me a big favor by examining me, or so I'll just close my eyes and let them get on with it, and think of nice things until it's over, and you're not really digesting the experience fully.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a dual approach that needs to be taken, where whoever it is, whether it's your reflexologist, your health coach, your physiotherapist, whatever the relationship is, there needs to be that balance and mutual respect there for each other. That is so, so important. Yeah.
And the other thing, because we are talking about female health in particular, I think the pedestal thing, it is, of course, also valid for men and people socialized as men. But I think especially for people in a female body who have been socialized as women, read as women, who are women, there is this, our bodies are treated like a commodity for someone else's will and bidding, like doing their bidding. And I dare say that most men or people socialized as men have learned to speak up for their needs and desires more than we have. I don't say that there aren't also individuals or even bigger groups of people who don't have similar experiences, but I think in general, boys from that age are encouraged more to speak up, to assert their needs, to get out their elbows, whether or not, like, I don't believe that's necessarily the right way to raise people, but you get what I mean, I hope.
Yeah.
That they are more inclined to speak up for themselves if they find this examination isn't going the way they like, and they are listened to more easily.
Yeah.
For women, it's like, it's almost like, good children don't speak when the grown-ups speak. So hush, little girl, you be silent and let us do our thing, because we only want to help you. And that is also big, because we've talked about birth trauma before, is like, that's also something I've heard and read about, that a lot of women or people giving birth have this experience where, again, their consent to certain procedures isn't given, but the procedures are just made because hush, hush, we know what's best for you.
Why
they don't.
And going back to the point that you were just making about the difference between men and women, just thinking about it culturally, whenever prostrate, I don't say that word right, I don't think, prostrate exam is referenced on the media, TV, comedy, it's like this big horrendous experience for the man. And it's such a they're so brave for doing it, and it's really uncomfortable, we won't talk about it, well done you. And then you switch to any gynecological procedure, and it's almost like, oh, it's a woman, it's a vagina, so we can all have a look. And the amount of times I went into procedures and there'd be medical students there, and me being me, I was always thinking, well, how are they going to learn if people don't let them look? So, and to be fair, the majority of the time the student was introduced to me, it was done in the right way. But I can remember once being in hospital, and I was in a horrendous state, and they brought a team. It was almost like an entourage of medical students to my bed and pulled the curtain round, and they're just all gawping at me. And I had, and they got, it was almost like a comedy sketch. They got like a lamp and, like lit up the stage in event. And I just I look back at it now and I think, oh my God, I don't think anyone ever said, is it okay if these 5 men come and look at your vagina whilst we pull your coil out? And it was just it's almost like it's given that you can expect that and do that to a woman's body. And there's so many horror stories as well that we hear, that add to your apprehension and anxiety and nerves and stress around going for a procedure. I know someone recently, within the last 12 months, shared a documentary with me called At Your Cervix, which I haven't watched, but it is about women being examined, having their cervix examined without their consent under general anaesthetic.
Oh.
And this is a practice. It's an American documentary, which is one of the reasons I haven't watched it. But because I can't get access to it, not because it's American. But I'll just clarify that. But a lot of these procedures, women were going in for non-gynecological procedures, but because medical students, gynecological medical students, have to do so many smear examinations to pass, they're doing it without consent on unconscious women. And you know, I'm not American, but hearing that, and this is another reason why I've not watched the documentary, because I know that my nervous system can't cope with it. Like, and I don't even have a cervix, but I just feel the violation for all those women. And then whenever I do have to potentially go and see a gynecologist or see a doctor, I'm carrying that subconsciously maybe with me, because we know as a collective, as women, that we've been violated for a long time, because it's just been deemed as okay.
It has been normalized.
Absolutely. So it's a really delicate topic and a really important one. And I just feel that raising awareness of it and giving people the narrative to say, you know, before we start, can you just explain exactly what's going to happen? You know, I can remember talking to a friend who hadn't had a smear before, you know, and I said to her, well, when you get in there, just say to your doctor, can you just talk me through exactly what you're going to do? Can you just explain it, so then I know? Because I can remember the first time I went, I didn't know where I was meant to put my legs and my bum and everything. I was getting all these instructions and I was like, I don't know what you're trying to get me to do, because there's just so much to think about. And then they're telling you to relax, and it's like, really?
Oh.
I cannot relax in this situation. I don't know if anyone can. So yeah, I think it's that thing of, when we start to ask for a change, especially if you're going into an appointment now and there's a medical student there, if you're then asking for the explanation of exactly what's going to happen, I'd like to think that medical student's going to observe that and think, that's really good practice. We need to do that to make sure that this individual feels informed and comfortable when in my care. So I think although it's not normalized, I think if individually we all try to ask for that change, I'd like to hope that it will become part of training and awareness. And I know that I'm picking on the medical community in these examples, but
well, I know for a fact that these things are happening, and that, like, I have been in touch with a professor here who does gender sensitive medical studies. The thing is just, the change is so slow, because right now they are working on including female specific health in the medical examinations and medical curriculum that will be put in place in 2028.
Yeah.
So that's how slow this whole process works. And yet, I believe, just as you say, if we start doing this, just asking the question, then we will bring awareness to the fact that it's important. And the last point that I want to make is, because we've focused a lot on the medical examination alone, but consent goes so much farther. especially when you think of sexuality and having sex, whether that's penetrative sex or other forms of sex, whatever it is. But being with a partner or partners, I understand that some people will roll their eyes and like, do I really have to ask for consent for every kiss? Is it okay to kiss you here? Is it okay to do this? No, of course you don't have to. And especially when you've been together for a while, you will know what the other enjoys. And also it will still keep, like, there is still this, okay, but I know from past experience, I can still ask for something different if I don't like this. So there will still be this consent thing around. Of course, you don't have to ask for everything when you've been together with that partner all the time. And also, it could be a lovely kind of game, can become always playful. Hey, would you enjoy if I do this?
Yeah.
Would you enjoy if I do that? What would you really like me to do now? And to just drop this in here and there to practice how good it can feel.
Yeah.
And especially for women, I believe, to feel like I am in charge here. I have self-agency. I have a certain degree of control over my body and what goes into my body and what doesn't go into my body.
Yeah.
In all kind of ways. That doesn't only work in the sexual realm, it also works for food or for water or for whatever other things that go into our bodies.
Yeah, completely. And it's okay for your needs to change, to ebb and flow, because I'm just thinking there's some times in my cycle where I don't like being touched. I get quite claustrophobic and a bit like, oh, I can't have you sleeping that close to me, or and it's taken me a while to be able to communicate that clearly and without causing offense because there's some nights where I don't even want anybody sat near me, whether it's a dog or my husband or whatever. Like when I'm sat on the sofa, I just need to be in my own space because it just feels, it's not always like secular. Sometimes it's just how I'm feeling. And again, it's that communication piece, being able to say, this is what I need right now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I still love you, but this is what I need. And it works as well, obviously, the other way around with my husband communicating his needs. But I think it's okay to just point out that it can change. And that's normal and that's okay. And you don't have to worry about, not wanting close intimacy all the time. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just that as with anything in life, we're evolving, we're ebbing, we're flowing, and that's absolutely okay. But I think communication is so important when it comes to consent within relationships, because as I say, things change for all of us, and that's absolutely okay.
Yeah, and the foundation, I think, is a healthy sense of self-worth. And that is not something we've ever talked about on the podcast, haven't we? So we might want to make an episode about that. Folks, how would you like that? Would you like us to do an episode about self-worth next time, maybe? Let us know in the comments or via email. But like, understanding that you are worthy of having needs, of having desires, of saying yes or no to certain things so that you can do it. But it starts with feeling worthy of speaking up for yourself because you are worth it.
Yeah.
So, dear listener, dear watcher, what is it that you are taking away from this podcast episode about the role of consent and the importance of consent, especially in female health? What has been a brand new insight for you? What else do you want to mention? What has your experience been with medical examinations? We would love to know. So leave us a comment or send us an email if you don't want to say anything openly. but we love opening conversations around these topics.
Yeah.
And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, to activate the bell so that you get informed whenever we release a new episode. And I'd say enjoy the rest of your day. Allow what has come through today to percolate. And we shall see each other in 2 weeks. Bye for now.
Bye.